Redditors who were diagnosed with ADHD as adults. Late. What are some things that you look back on and realize were ADHD symptoms? Always being late for everything, including every meal, talking super fast, talking loudly and not realizing, needing subtitles for TV, movies, not being able to start assignments on time, being unable to focus if more than one person is talking about different subjects in a room, that is one person and I having a conversation but another person is talking loudly on the phone in the background. If there's more background noise it's fine but just one person, not great. Being overly emotional and expressive a lot of the time, etc. AskReddit have finally been referred for a diagnosis, just waiting to hear back from specialists after being put on the waiting list. Wasn't told I might have ADHD until around 5 years ago. Where to start? The rejection sensitivity, the constant anxiety because being punished for forgetting things has left a very significant mental mark on me. You forget things on purpose just to hurt us, being always extremely early for things, just so you won't be late. Executive dysfunction, no it's not being lazy, it's your brain just being on nope mode. The maladaptive, daydreaming, the shifting from one hobby to another to the level that I now have up that 15 creative hobbies at the same time. Over-explaining everything just to make sure you get your point across. Be careful, it can piss people off very much on the internet, because they assume you're being condescending. The sensory delayed, saying what? And immediately answering the question. You just needed a split second extra to process the question. The stimming, the making odd and funny noises out of nowhere, having breakdowns because you can't handle the chaos you have caused yourself or is caused by others, sensory overload, others getting on my nerves, and me needing time alone to process. And, not a symptom, but more of a side effect of the late diagnosis, the sheer and complete anger and frustration with my parents never thinking, gee, maybe she should see a psychiatrist. No. Instead they just assumed I did everything on purpose. The pain that they could have spared me from, if only they looked past their own superiority of I know everything better than everyone, I would now not be the anxious mess I am now. I was diagnosed 11 years ago, and I am still dealing with the pain. My story is pretty similar to a lot of the others here. AFAB. Did well in school only because anxiety fueled me to turn in assignments, honors classes. Did well without studying so no one cared. But here's some others. Decision paralysis. I spent nights, and vividly a birthday, crying because I'd get yelled at when couldn't figure out what I wanted for dinner, but didn't want the options given. Consistently forgetting the words for things I should know, or taking a long time to get to the word. That whole, now that you've asked me, it has physically left my brain thing happens to me all the time. Losing a whole day because I have something to do in the afternoon. I cannot spool up because this other thing is happening. Lack of focus. I can't focus on anything in school. I force myself to do that, but it is near impossible. I would rather think of anything else, and sometimes it's physically painful to sit in class. My body straight up tells me get TF up and go. I wanna walk and write on that paper go away. And also, sleeping problems. Don't get me wrong, once I fall asleep it's all food. But falling asleep, it takes me an average of about 30 minutes to fall asleep. As I get older, the time gets slower, though, was at 45 minutes once. After a lifetime of being told I'm smart but just don't apply myself, I realized that my complete and utter lack of motivation to do anything I felt was boring may not be normal. Like it wasn't that I didn't want to do schoolwork, it's that I physically couldn't make myself do it. Coupled with hyper-focusing on interesting things and totally zoning out during conversation, to my husband's everlasting annoyance, I realized that I fit the exact definition of ADHD. I was evaluated and diagnosed at 23. Was fine throughout secondary school, high school, when there was a pretty strict routine, lots of different classes etc. But then sixth form, and after that university was a nightmare. I struggled so much with sitting down to study when there was so many other distractions, and was stressed at having to identify the best way to study and learn that particular topic, rather than it being spoon-fed to me. That and starting work in office roles, staring at the screen knowing the administrative task I needed to do, but getting genuinely stressed because it was so tedious I couldn't bring myself to do it. Rejection-sensitive dysphoria. Getting rejected, whether in a friendship or a romantic relationship, was, and still is, utterly devastating. I thought I was just crazy. Nope, others are just very sensitive to rejection. Thinking that the lack of positive feelings was just depression, not exactly helped by a psychiatrist who pressured me into taking antidepressants rather than fully assessing whether I had ADHD or not. Finally got myself a proper assessment 10 years later and got the diagnosis, and one of the things that motivated me into trying once more was because a female friend told me that this flatness, numbness was one symptom in her own diagnosis. I'm not 100% into the science, but apparently they used to think it was due to lack of dopamine, but in later years the research has shown that it is about less sensitive receptors and the dopamine getting transported faster out of the synapse. But don't quote me on this, not sure if I paraphrased what I've read correctly. The fact that it was nearly impossible for me to do any kind of homework in high school, college, unless I knew for a fact that not doing it would cause me to fail a class. And even then, it was a struggle. Like, I didn't just not like doing it, I just couldn't muster enough concentration to get through it. I was basically a pathological liar when it came to homework avoidance. I'd say anything just not to have to do it. I was smart enough to test well, which I used to carry my grades while doing the minimum possible. Also, I would never review my answers on tests. I'd tell myself, if you didn't know the first time around, what's going to change by reviewing it? But really, I just wanted to be done as soon as I could before my level of attention was gone. I should have realized the level of distracted I constantly am is not normal. TBH, the more I think about it, the more obvious it is. I'm like textbook primarily inattentive ADHD, but I'm a girl, and I'm smart enough that I managed to compensate in school even though I struggled, so no one ever noticed. I suspect I might actually also be autistic, too, but yeah, always distracted, have a hard time paying attention to detail. Despite how meticulous I am, I'd still constantly make mistakes like adding instead of multiplying or skipping a negative number or something of that sort. I can't remember jack shit if I don't write everything down. I can't get things done if I don't write it down. I get painfully bored, like literally physically painful. It's bizarre and my parents never understood that one. I process things differently. I interact differently, whole bunch of things. The obvious lack of attention and procrastination and whatnot, but my biggest one was impulse control. I used to do random crazy shit at a whim and be confused why everyone was pissed off with me or even annoyed at myself for doing something so actively stupid after I'd done it. My lack of impulse control also carried into a lot of negative behaviors as an adult, which I'm trying my best to undo. Overall though, I have a very active imagination and I think my brain being different is definitely a blessing with downfalls rather than a curse with some upsides. I always had unlimited amounts of drive and ambition that were never capitalized on because I couldn't focus enough to take in the information needed. I wanted to be successful and had no idea what was holding me back. Fast forward to adult world, struggling in accounting, I get a prescription and immediately my life was changed. Having to write everything down or else it'd be forgotten, getting up super early and still somehow always running late, not being able to listen to whoever I'm talking to if I can hear another conversation going on next to me, constantly fidgeting with things and feeling restless unless I was super engaged with something, for example completely engrossed in a film or something, trouble motivating myself to do work that I have to do but easily spending hours on things I enjoy without even realizing I'm spending hours on it. I'm female and unfortunately it's often misdiagnosed in women. As a child I was told I was very bright, I was in our school's gifted and talented classes, but I really struggled to keep up with the workload and would often lose homework sheets even though I was sure I hadn't taken them out of my bag. It wasn't the content I struggled with, it was actually doing the work. I was diagnosed with major depression as a teenager and it was only earlier this year, I'm 22 now, that my GP suspected I might have ADHD after I came back and told her that the new antidepressants I was on still weren't working. I'm currently waiting on my referral to the local mental health team but they're a bit overwhelmed at the moment so it could take a while. Inattentive ADHD, losing shit constantly, well, misplacing, either hyper-focused or can't pay attention to anything, using the wrong words when I know what the right thing to say is, being very all or nothing when it comes to certain things, like my house, I can keep it super clean but if someone else is slacking then it seems almost unbearably hard to keep up. Add female here. I was always staring out of windows in class and when people calling me I was so zoned out I couldn't hear them. Studying was the most difficult thing in the world and I forgot so many things. When I walked out of a store I really had to think hard about which direction I was coming from. It felt and feel as walking through clouds in my head. I cannot get to the right information at the right time. I hate loud noises or different noises sounding simultaneously. Normal cars really tire me out. There is a lot more, but I can't reach that information right now. The daydreaming in class, the inability to make strong lasting friendships, the emotional outbursts over little things, the hyper-focus on reading and art, but at the same time having to read whole pages twice because I didn't pay attention to what I was reading, the violently chaotic bedroom that I could never bring myself to tidy, the drawing everywhere, including the walls at a house we rented for summer holiday and the windowsills at my kindergarten. I look back and I realize that it's why I couldn't do certain things many times without getting bored, played a certain video game for more than like a 2-week period without taking like a month break. It's why I struggled to focus and care about school, even though throughout all of my time in school I only got A's and B's. It's why I can't stop moving. It's why I have a need to have my hands on something at all. It's why I can't keep my hands off a cool object if I want it. This would be like something I see that I think is kind of neat like a Rubik's Cube, and I'll pick it up after asking permission, mess with it for a few minutes, and put it down to repeat the cycle. It's why I can't really handle slow-paced video games with a low field of view. It's why I got bored so much faster than the average person. It's why having nothing has always been physically torture for me. Not me but my father thought he was lazy all the time when he was a child because his ADHD was never diagnosed. He had a hard time in school and even had plans for tests that he taught me, where he just keeps to one of the 4 questions and gets at least 25%. He didn't know he had ADHD until I was born and diagnosed. He then found out the symptoms, because he had never heard of it, and the symptoms matched what he felt. He has a good job now and takes ADHD medication. That may be constantly feeling like I was hearing super loud circus music all the time while trying to do anything and everything feels so loud and what's that and why does it feel like bees so many bees in my head man I love bees knees cheese bus look at the bus someone's talking nice I want a biscuit wasn't normal. Still do it, but I can't get dresses in a normal order. I put on my shirt, then my pants, then my socks, one shoe, all the stuff in my pockets, my watch, my jacket and other shoe. Not always in that order, but I get distracted while doing one task and can't forget this. My roommates wonder why I run into the kitchen half-dressed with one shoe or sock on to grab my car keys, but my mind has to find those first before I have the chance to forget. One specific moment stuck with me. It was a sunny day in primary school, UK, 5 to 11 years/0, and despite my best efforts I wasn't able to knuckle down and do my work. I had to stay in during lunch and they sat me by the door to the playground so I still got some fresh air. It was torture though, as I could see all the other children running around in the sun having the time of their life. Then, despite my best efforts the following day exactly the same thing happened. I can remember clear as if it happened yesterday thinking this isn't my fault. I did everything I could to avoid this and yet here I am being punished again for being me. That was something that happened time and time again for me. In secondary school I loved sport and probably every other week I would have to miss classes or playing for the school football/hockey/rugby/basketball team because I forgot my kit. As if that wasn't punishment enough they would often double it up on me and give me detention. Absolutely infuriating looking back. I was tested negative as a 10-year-old. I always struggled in school even though I really tried. Had to go additional years in school in order to get the needed grades. Teacher could explain to us what to do and everyone would start with their assignment. I'd just sit there and be confused. Was tested positive for ADHD and Asperger's a few months back. 26 years old. Which was a relief but would have wanted it earlier so I could have gotten the help I needed. Having silent meltdowns, compete with nosebleeds when forced to do math homework, having to leave class once/twice per hour to go to the bathroom/smoke/have coffee, have a snack, get some air, losing everything, forgetting entire conversations, entire days, entire people, fighting, being a class clown, doing weird shit throughout grade school, and feeling like I was burning alive when wearing the wrong clothes, binge eating straight out of the womb. I was and am voracious, which is why I developed bulimia. All of my family's funny stories about me as a young child are neon signs for ADHD lol. Looking to get a diagnosis but there is loads of things. I tick off all the boxes. For me I struggled to fit in at school as I was impulsive and things would come out my mouth before my brain had a chance to catch up as to whether it was a good thing to say or not. I always daydreamed in pretty much every lesson and all my teacher reports were the same, smart but need to apply themselves and try harder. Not diagnosed as yet, waiting for my appointment. But I wrote my 10,000-word undergrad dissertation, thesis for our American cousins, you know, the one you're supposed to spend a year writing, in 36 hours, start to finish, because that's how long I had left before the deadline, and I simply could not sit down to start it. Couldn't think how to start, couldn't plan it out. I just sat down and wrote it in a peak of hyperactivity. That and I never revised for an exam, couldn't focus reading textbooks. Revising would get maybe 5 minutes in and my mind would completely wander. Could never take notes in class because I would just zone out. Somehow being unable to stop talking. Constantly getting distracted or sidetracked while trying to do something important, being able to remember some useless fact I read years ago but can't remember the list of things I need to do today to save my life and zoning out. Oh my god, the zoning out. I've had people start talking to me and I completely drift off into space. Of course I would have no idea what they said and because I was too nervous to ask them to repeat themselves I'd just smile and be like yeah, cool, me too. Not diagnosed yet but soon. It's that I always forgot things, and I still do today. I'm 18, will turn 19 this year, and I've noticed that my forgetfulness is one of the main traits of ADHD/ADD. I'm also extremely fidgety and can't really sit still while at school. I mostly bounce either of my legs to keep myself moving somehow, and I often make small mistakes because I read too fast and thus miss out on details.